Christianity and Medieval Society, Section 3. The Church shaped society and politics. Nearly everyone who lived in Europe during the Middle Ages was Christian. In fact, Christianity was central to every part of life. Church officials were called clergy, and their teachings were very influential in European culture and politics. The Church and Society. In the Middle Ages, life revolved around the local church. Markets, festivals, and religious ceremonies all took place there. For some people, however, the local church was not enough. They wanted to see important religious sites, the places where Jews lived, where holy men and women died, where miracles happened. The church encouraged these people to go to pilgrimage, journey to religious locations. Among the most popular destinations were Jerusalem, Rome, and Compostela. In northwestern Spain, each of these cities had churches Christians wanted to visit. Another popular pilgrimage destination was Canterbury, near London in England. Hundreds of visitors went to Canterbury near London, Canterbury each year. One such visit is the basis of one of the greatest books of the Middle Ages, the Canterbury Tales of the Geoffrey Chaucer. Chaucer's book tells Book of pilgrimage fulfilled drawn, like many people, to Canterbury. When in April the swift showers then pierced the drought of March onto the root, the then people longed to go to pilgrimage. And Palmers longed to see the strange trends of saints followed in sundry land, and especially from each year's end of England down to Canterbury they went. The Church and politics. The Church also gained political power during the Middle Ages. Many people left the land to the Church when they died. In fact, the Church was one of the largest landholders in Europe. Eventually, the Church divided this land into fiefs. In this way, it became a feudal lord. Of a clergy, bishops, and abbots were most involved in political matters. They often advised the local rulers. Some clergy got so involved in politics that they spent little time dealing with religious affairs. Monks and friars. Some people were unhappy with the political nature of the church. They thought the clergy should focus only on spiritual matters. These people feared that the church had become obsessed with wealth and power. The monks of Cluny. Among those unhappy with the church were a group of French monks in the early 900s. They started a monastery in the town of Cluny. The monks of Cluny followed a strict schedule of prayers and religious service. They paid little attention to the world, concerning themselves only with religious matter. The changes at Cluny led to the creation of a religious order, the Cluniac monks. A religious order is a group of people who dedicate their lives to religion and follow common rules. Across Europe, people saw Cluny as an example of how monks should live. They built new monasteries and tried to live like the Cluniacs. Other new orders. By 1100s, though some monks thought that even Cluny's rules weren't strict enough. They created new orders with even stricter rules. Some took vows of silence and stopped speaking to each other. Others lived in tiny rooms and left them only to go to church services. Men were not the only ones to create and join religious orders. Women were allowed to join these kind of orders as well. Communities of nuns called convents of appeared across Europe. Like monks, these nuns lived to a strict set of rules. The nuns of each convent prayed the work together under the watchful eyes of an abbess. the convent leader. Although monks and nuns lived apart from other people, they did a great deal for society. For example, they collected and stored texts that explained Christian teachings. Monks spent hours copying these documents, and they sent copies to monasteries across Europe. The friars. Not everyone who joined a religious order wanted to live apart from society. Some wanted to live in cities and spread Christian teachings. As a result, two new religious orders were begun in the early 1200s. These orders were Dominicians and the Franciscans, named for their founders Dominic de Guzman and Francis of Assisi. Because they didn't live in monasteries, because members of the orders were not monks. They were friars, people who belonged to religious order but lived and worked among the general public. Friars lived simply, wearing plain robes and no shoes like monks. They owned no property. They roamed around preaching and begging for food. For the reason, friars were also called mendicants, from a Latin word from beggars. The main goal of the friars was to teach people how to live good Christian lives. They taught people about generosity, and they taught people about and kindness. A player called Francis illuminates what the friars hoped to do. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me show love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. Universities are built. While some people were drawing away from the world in monasteries and convents, others were looking for ways to learn more about it. In time, their search for knowledge led to the creation of Europe's first universities. Some of the earliest universities were created by the church. The church's goal was to teach people about religion. Other universities were created by groups of students who went searching for teachers who could tell them about the world. Most teachers in the universities were members of clergy. Besides religion, school taught law, medicine, astronomy, and other courses. All classes were taught in Latin, although relatively few people in Europe spoke Latin. It was the language of scholars and the church. As people began to study new subjects, some of them developed new ideas about the world. In particular, they wondered how human reason and Christian faith was related. In the past, people have believed that some things could be proven with reason, but other things had been to face taken on faith. Some people in universities so began to wonder if the two ideas could work together. One such person was Dominican philosopher Thomas Aquinas. Thomas was a teacher at the University of Paris. He argued that rational thoughts could be used to support Christian beliefs. For example, he wrote an argument to prove the existence of God. Thomas also believed that God had created a law that governed how the world operated. He called it natural law. If people could study and learn more about this law, he argued they could learn to live the way God wanted. Church and arts. Religious architecture. Many of Europe's churches were incredible works of art. The grandest of these churches are cathedrals, large churches in which bishops led religious services beginning in 1100s. Europeans built their cathedrals using a dramatic new style called Gothic architecture. Gothic cathedrals were not only places to pray, but also symbols of people's faiths. As a result, they were towering works of great majesty and glory. What made these Gothic churches so unusual? For one thing, they were much taller than other older churches. The walls often rose up hundreds of feet, and the ceilings seemed to reach heaven. Huge windows of stained glass red sun pour in, filling the churches with dazzling colors. Many of these amazing churches still exist. People continue to worship in them and admire their beauty. In religious arts, medieval churches were also filled up with beautiful objects created to show respect to gods. Ornate paintings and tapestries covered the walls and ceilings. Even the clothing priests were during religious services were attractive. Their robes were often highly decorative, sometimes with thread made of gold. Many of these books used during religious ceremonies were beautiful objects. Monks had copied these books carefully. They also decorate them using bright colors to adorn the first letters and the borders of each page. Some monks added thin sheets of silver and gold to the pages. Because these pages seemed to grow, we used the word illuminated to describe them.